researchers will be able to
Time
develop
just
treatments that are
moves.
as unique and complex
And
as
boy,
with this
does
new
it.
information, doctors will have a better
Song
understanding
says
of
time
disease
keeps on
so they
slipping
can
into the
innovate the next
future.
great
Oh my
breakthroughs in
gosh.
medicine. Learn more at joinallofus.org.
What is this?
When I went looking for a place to rent, I wore a mask, but they could still see that I'm
Look
black.
up and
The
time
landlord
is
told me,
just-
Nothing available.
When I went looking for an apartment, I wore
boy,
a
the
mask.
time is
but they could
gone.
still see
Hey
I'm
everybody,
Latino.
how you
They
doing this
said,
morning? We're gonna have
The
Ray
place
McGovern
has
on
already been rented.
with
But I
us. I'm
still
so
see the
excited
unit
about
available on
him.
the website.
Pastor
When
Tisha
my
Dixon
wife
Williams,
and I
he
went
was
looking for a place to buy, we wore
the
masks.
chief
But
You
CIA
can still
officer
see
to
that
brief
we're
the
Asian
president
American, and the
for
real
several
estate agent said,
decades.
You won't be happy
And
here.
he's very,
COVID-19 inequity is real,
just
and
very
it shouldn't be
progressive in
made
his
worse
thinking. You
because of
see him
housing
getting arrested,
discrimination. If
calling
you suspect housing
American officials
discrimination
out
because of your
on
race, color, or national origin,
on
file a complaint with HUD, your local
lies in the
fair housing
intelligence
center,
community.
so
He
we
said
can
that
investigate.
that are really
Go to
undermining us. He said
HUD.gov/fairhousing.
Iraq was
That's
only about oil. That's it.
HUD.gov/fairhousing.
And I'm going to ask him today,
The law is
is
on
this
your
about
side.
religion or
A
resources?
message from the U.S.
Because you know
Department
they
of
found
Housing and
half a
Urban Development
trillion
in partnership
dollars
with the
worth of
National
gas
Fair
just off the
Housing
coast of
Alliance.
Gaza.
You're listening.
And they're still
Stand by.
trading.
T820.
You know,
Because facts matter.
Still making that money.
We can change the world, change the world, change the world. We can change the world, we can change the world, change the world.
This is the Santita Jackson Show.
War and hate to a place of love, it's not too late. Gotta save the children, we can't wait. Let's change the world.
Happy December, everybody. I'm Santita Jackson. Get a little bit of feedback there. I'm going to work that out. Yeah. WCPT 820, the nation's largest progressive talk radio station, and AM 950 radio, the voice of progressive Minnesota. It is a joy to be with you today. Got a special guest, Ray McGovern. Yeah, you know Ray McGovern, the former CIA analyst. Indeed, he was the lead analyst to brief the President of the United States. He was part of the team, then he headed the team for decades. And he has gone on to be one of the founders of Veterans Intelligence Professionals for Sanity. You know, when many of us were being told that Iraq was about Saddam Hussein and a dictatorship, he said, no. This is about oil, period. And he's been calling out the lies and really the misdeeds, not just of the intelligence establishment, but of our government. And he helps us to see things that are being done in our names and really understand how the world works. So I'm really excited to have him because I want him to share with us what he sees happening in the Middle East and around the world and where America fits in on all of this. And, you know, is America taking a hit, you know, given our posture in the Middle East at this point? I mean, taking a hit publicly. I mean, in terms of our influence, think about it. Russia, China, India, the global South, that is the nations of color, they are all siding with the Palestinians, and more European nations are, more and more people around the world are. And America's seen as the superpower that's fueling this massacre, which has resumed. And it is a massacre. That's what it is. You know, I don't know where they're talking about the fighting. The only fighting I'm seeing are the bombs that are being dropped in Palestine. So let's talk about that. It's not making anyone safe, everybody. It's not ending anything. That is not how, I don't know how you're wiping out Hamas. I just don't understand it. And I want him to talk to us about that. But Mehdi Hassan, brilliant journalist on MSNBC, was fired. Now, it's very interesting. A few weeks ago, there was a rumor that the 3 Muslim anchors on MSNBC were being terminated. And MSNBC strenuously said that is not true. But now we see that one, at least in part, it's true for one person. Simone Sanders' show is being moved to a special slot, I guess, for election time. And Michael Steele, former head of the RNC, really good guy. And Simone's a wonderful person. It's great to see that, but we're going to miss Mehdi Hassan. He gave really unflinching analysis of what's happening in the Middle East, and that's very, very important. But he did that with all of the work that he did, and we're going to miss his voice. So why do you think he was removed? Call me at 773-763-9278. Was he being too truthful? 773-763-9278, 773-763-WCPT. And what do you want to ask, or what do you want me to ask, or what do you want to ask Ray McGovern when he gets on the air? So let's get to some of these headlines on the Santita Jackson show, so we can get right to it, everybody. The pause in fighting between Israel and Hamas is over, according to this Washington Post report. The pause, which took effect a week ago and allowed for exchanges of hostages held by Hamas for Palestinian prisoners, people who actually had not been charged, most of whom have not been charged with any crime. And indeed, they arrested children, 5, 6, 7, 8-year-old children who were held for years. Well, that exchange is over. That release is over. It expired this morning. Israel's military said it resumed airstrikes on the Gaza Strip minutes after the pause ended. The U.S. and Israel agreed to demands to minimize civilian deaths. Indeed, the United States has urged the IDF to be more precise in their airstrikes. A gag order on Donald Trump was reinstated in his New York fraud case. An appeals court yesterday upheld a judge's order that prevents the former president from making public comments about court staff in this civil case. The order was issued after former President Trump posted a photo of an employee that the judge said led to threats against said employee. Former President Trump has recently taken aim at the judge's wife. Wow. A federal judge blocked Montana's TikTok ban yesterday. A number of malaria cases surged by millions last year. There were about 249 million cases across the globe in 2022, according to the World Health Organization. And Sean McGowan, wow, has passed on. He helped to reinvent the Irish music scene with his group fusing punk rock with Celtic influences. Wow, he was only 65 years of age and he died yesterday. And so those are some of the headlines. In Chicago, you can see it's already raining. It'll have a high of 44 degrees and rain throughout the day. Minneapolis, St. Paul, 36 degrees, mostly cloudy. In the NBA, the Bulls 120, the Bucks 113, the Timberwolves 101, the Jazz 90. In the NFL, the Cowboys over the Seahawks 41-35. In the NHL, the Red Wings 5, Chicago 1, and the Wild 6. And the Predators 1. So kind of a mixed bag, but a really great night in sports. Pastor Tisha Dixon Williams, First Baptist Church of Bridgehampton, New York. How are you? The author of I See You, Sis. I See You, Sis. How you doing?
I'm doing well this morning. How are you?
You know what? I'm doing well. I had a revelation before you give the good news. It was very interesting. I've had a lot of friends who've made their transition. I mean, people my age. That gets you to thinking, right? Because you just start saying, well,
yeah,
you know, my number is a little bit closer. You know, and that's, you know, for me, I'm totally fine with that because I feel like we're going home. I just want to finish the work, my assignment while I'm here, right? And one of our friends, you know, was from a family, a couple of them from a families that were very comfortable and they struggled throughout their lives. And, you know, some of the older people who were making commentary about their lives said, well, you know, they had too much money and, you know, they had too much free time. And I said, no, they lost their way. You know, one of my friends lost his agency because his parents pushed him in a particular career direction. Another, he was pushed into a marriage that he didn't want. And on and on and on and on. And I said, you know, when you lose your agency, that's a really, really tough thing. And sometimes people never recover. You know, when I say lose your agency, I mean lose your direct link to what you're supposed to do while you're down here. So it's just something I wanted to share with you because I thought about that. And I said, I need to change my thinking about this too. Pastor Tisha Dixon Williams. Do you think I'm off base?
No, I don't think you're off base at all. I think you're right. I don't think you're off base at all. One of the questions that we have all the time is about death. We question life more than any time. in the face of death. Where am I going? What am I doing? As a matter of fact, I always say everyone should have a theme song for their life. And the theme song for my life is the theme from Mahogany, where the lyrics say, do you know where you're going to? Do you like the things that life is showing you? Where are you going to? Do you know?
Do you get
Do
what
you
you're
get what you're hoping for?
Come on, girl.
When you look behind you, there's no open door. What are you hoping for? Do you know? And I just think that's, death brings about more questions than it does life. The good news about that is God can handle our questions. It's okay to ask questions. It's okay to have those questions. It's okay to wonder. It's okay to want to know. Yeah. And I don't care how many times you see it or experience it. Death and transition in death is strange. I don't care how long you've been preaching, pastoring in the medical profession or what have you. Death is strange no matter how many times you see it. And so, yeah, it should cause us to question.
Thank you for that, because tis the season. During this season, I've
tend to
lose people, right? And so it's yeah. Thank you for that, and I needed that. I said, let me just ask her that on the air, because I know a lot of people going through a lot of things right now. And one of my friends asked me, why do we lose so many people during the holidays? And just I'm hearing all of these questions now because a lot of us have lost a lot of people over the past couple of years anyway. And so I thank you for that. I really, thanks.
You're welcome.
I needed that. How about that? So what's on your mind today? Oh, no, thank you.
Well, interestingly, it kind of ties in with the question that you asked, because it's all about judgment. And when we talk about judgment, we often think about ridicule, or how we condemn people, or how we look at people, or stigmatize people. But if we want to be honest about it this morning, we don't have a choice but to judge. Most of our life is spent in a space of judging. When you think about it, we have dreams that we defer for fear of being judged. There are opportunities we let slip through our fingers because we're afraid of what they're going to say. We're afraid to talk to someone. We're afraid to wear certain things. We're afraid to change our hair, all because we don't want to be judged. No one wants to feel as though decisions that they make are being questioned. No one wants to be belittled because of a poor decision or based on your looks or physical attractiveness. But judgment has its place, and judgment doesn't always have to be bad or critical. When you think about it, using your judgment is a fundamental part of life. The ability to judge is key to marrying the right person. You have to judge whether or not your personalities mesh and whether you're well suited. What's her family like? Does he want children? Do we fight more than we laugh? All of those things take judgment. We use judgment when raising our children to assess their behaviors to ensure they're on the right track. The ability to judge really affects our quality of life. It determines if it's the right school for us, the right job for us, the right investment for us, the right move for us. So when we think about it, most of our day and most of our lives are spent in an attitude of judgment. And so judgment is not a bad thing when you think about the question you just asked. Am I living well? Am I living the right life? Am I doing the right things? Am I on the right track? Is God pleased? All of those things take judgment. But when we think about judgment, judgment is also part of our attitude about how we judge other people. And so there's an ad that says, if you're going to drink, drink responsibly. And I say, if you're going to judge, you must also judge responsibly. When we judge, we form an opinion about something or someone after careful thought. We regard people either good or bad. But when Jesus makes the statement in the book of Matthew, it wasn't a blanket statement to mean that we should never judge, but rather he was moved to speak because of the way that people were arrogant and how they were acting and how they were judging people. And they judged people based on if them themselves were beyond judgment. And so we have to stop judging by mere appearances, but judge correctly or righteously. In other words, Jesus was saying to us, if you're going to judge, Judge right, judge righteously. And what does that mean? It means thinking and feeling and acting in a way that totally conforms to God's will. When we judge, it ought to be in a way that conforms to God's will, not the world's standard. We judge scripturally. So we shouldn't judge based on opinion, but judge based on what we know to be true, what we know the Word of God says. We judge wisely and prayerfully. If we can't judge wisely, we ought to ask God for wisdom. That was Solomon's key. He asked for the wisdom to judge God's people, and God made him king. We have to judge factually. Get all the facts before you cast judgment on somebody. If you're going to tell the story, tell it all. And we judge silently. When I say this, I don't mean you judge yourself or judge to yourself or in your mind. But when I say judge silently, I mean, here's a rule of thumb. Jesus is quiet about it. We should probably stay quiet about it. If there's no basis for judgment, don't judge, because the reality is the things we find so offensive, Jesus didn't bat an eye at. He didn't say a word about it. We're getting upset about the things that did not upset Jesus. And you'd be interested to know what upset Jesus. Hypocrisy, greed, superiority. All of those things were the true things that upset him. And so it's not our job to judge others. It's not our job to convict others. It's not our job necessarily to reprove others. Not our job. Let's do our job. What's our job? To admonish the unruly, to encourage the faint-hearted, to help the weak, to be patient with everyone. This is the type of judgment that is required of us as it pertains to our fellow man. That's our job. Love God and love your neighbor as yourself. I know that people think that's light stuff, that that's just watered down gospel. There are people who believe that if you aren't preaching from Revelation, you aren't preaching. But scriptures like this are considered milk, and they're craving meat. We become so super sanctified that we're spiritually lactose intolerant, but that is the meat. This is the substance of our whole faith. Love God and love your neighbor as yourself. I want you to know that's not milk. That's meat. That's the USDA choice, ground brown, blue ribbon, Kobe beef, ribeye, T-bone steak, filet mignon of our entire faith. And if we can't digest that, we have to stay in the dairy aisle. So judge responsibly. Judge in a way that conforms to God's will. Judge in a way that uplifts people. And judge in a way where you're willing to assess yourself before you assess others. And that's the good news.
Thank you for that. That really did flow into what's been on my heart. Because I said, you know, but I say this all the time, you know, whenever things that we don't understand, we say, oh, that's crazy. Or I was talking with my mother and she came a little upset with me. But I said, well, you know, we can disagree without being disagreeable. Not really, but everybody's got a mom. Okay. And we were talking about someone. And I said, well, Mom, we know who she is to us, but we don't know who she is as a mom. I said, so we got to get out of that. Boy, she was furious. She was to honor your father and your mother. I said, the Bible also has admonitions against you abusing your children, doing them wrong. Am I not wrong? Am I not right? Pastor, I mean, you're not supposed to abuse your children either, right?
That is correct. That is correct.
Okay. So I said, you know, part of the challenge is, I said, we don't know all the pieces. I said, and we're sitting here speculating, and everybody has, because we have a friend who everyone said, you know, because we loved her mother, and I still do. But her daughter, she was just a horror. She wasn't nice to her mom. I said, when I spoke with the daughter at the repast, I said, the rumor that I've heard, I've got the impression that she was true. That is that she was incested by her father.
Oh, wow.
Our dear friend's husband. I said, perhaps that is why she was sent to boarding school. My mother didn't want to hear it. I said, now, I get you. I said, I know we love her. I said, but there's so many. I said, there's something that's off here. And 2 + 2 does not equal 5. There's a factor of 1 we're missing. I said, we don't know it. This was years ago. And I think that just happens so often in life. We just don't have the whole story.
We don't have the whole story.
Don't have the whole story. Thank you for that. Thank you for that. How can we worship with you and everyone? Put this book, I See You, Sis, under everybody's Christmas tree. under everybody's Christmas tree.
Yes, please.
Please do that. Go to Amazon. You're going to see yourself and someone you love, whether you're male or female, but particularly if you're a woman, you're going to see yourself in this. You're going to see some heroes and heroines in your own life. How can we worship with you on Sundays? Or just throughout the week to listen to these archived sermons, because you are our preaching machine.
Thank you. You can fellowship with us and listen to us and join us virtually on YouTube every Sunday morning at 11 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. And we'd love to have you.
All right.
Go to the First Baptist Church of Bridgehampton page and subscribe.
We just love you, Pastor Tisha Dixon Williams, sending you so much
I
love
love
today.
you all too.
Oh, my goodness.
You too.
Absolutely, absolutely. Everybody, let's talk about Mehdi Hasan. Loved his show on MSNBC. It's been canceled. There was a rumor that the 3 Muslim anchors on MSNBC were going to be canceled. MSNBC strenuously rejected that notion, that rumor. Well, now one of them has been. Someone who spoke out strenuously, truthfully about what's happening in the Middle East. Was that the reason? Or were they just having a shake-up? Let's talk about it on the Santita Jackson Show. Back in just a minute. Ooh, thank you so much for that. I really, really
you're very
appreciate that
welcome.
more than I can even tell you. I'm telling you, I looked up and I saw this woman. I said, for some reason, she came and sat with me at the repast. You know, people think that I have this little kooky view of things, right? And we just ended up talking. And then I said, oh my goodness, as I listened to her, I said, oh, I think this is the missing piece here. You know, and it broke my heart, you know? Broke my heart.
Yes.
And it broke my heart for her because she's been held in such judgment by so many for so long. And I said, you know, y'all are missing the point on this woman here. This ain't what there's a little bit more to this story. In fact, there's a whole lot more to this story. And you know what? It typically is, right? So there it is.
Yes, it is.
Yes, typically, it is always so much more, so much that we do not know. So thank you for that. Thank you for that. And I cannot wait to see you, and it will be soon.
Yes, I hope so.
Oh, I promise you it will be. Yeah. I promise you it will
I've never been to Chicago during the holidays. I feel like it's probably beautiful.
Oh, girl, you need to come on.
Hi, Miss Jackson.
Yeah.
We have Dwight McKee, Dr. Gibbs, and Bryce Green still working on getting Reverend Dr. Erie.
Okay, well, we can, you know, if you don't get him, we'll get him at the top of the hour, but for sure.
Perfect.
Oh, yeah. Hi, everybody. Let me do a mic check. Bryce Green.
Check, check, check.
All right, mic checker. And we have got Dr. Gibbs.
2 minutes.
Yes, I'm here.
Calling him in the middle of the night. I'm sorry about that. You know what?
No problem.
No. Typically, I'm a little bit better. I'm a lot better about this, but I have been falling asleep. Just, you know, as I've been coming back from this pneumonia, it's not happening as quickly as I thought that it would be. No, it's all right. Please, it's just one of those things, you know. I am still here.
Yes, thank you.
So I'm not even worried about it. But we've got Ray McGovern. You know, I cannot wait to ask him all these questions today. Oh, I could just talk to him forever. Like I could talk to you, because, you know, I love people who probe deeply.
Back in a minute.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, I actually, I'm also a fan of Ray McGovern. I like his views a lot.
Oh, a man of such tremendous integrity.
Yes, I agree.
You know, I just love him to pieces. I want to do something with him too.
sorry to hear about your pneumonia, Santita. That's very unfortunate.
You know what? I guess because in our family, we get it, that's kind of when we're vulnerable. I'm all right with it because guess what? I'm still here. How about that?
That's good. That's the important thing.
Yeah. And it was, but the thing is that the dangerous part is that it was walking pneumonia. So I didn't know that I had it. I just knew I was very tired. And it's viral. So just it takes, then I got COVID on top of that. But the COVID was okay.
Oh, God.
No, COVID was okay. It's just I hadn't gotten rid of that.
Change the world, change the world. Yes, we can change the world. We can change the world, change the world.
This is the Santita Jackson Show.
War and hate to a place of love. It's not too late. Gotta save the children. We can't wait. Let's change the world.
Hey, everybody. Welcome to the Santita Jackson Show, 773-763-9278 here on WCPT. That's right, you hear Honey Bun in the background. The nation's largest progressive talk radio station, and AM 950 Radio, the voice of progressive Minnesota. It is a joy to be with all of you this morning, and let's talk about Mehdi Hasan. Many of us have been really avid watchers of his work. He's done just razor sharp reporting on MSNBC, and he's been one of the few voices in corporate media who's really given a perspective that is inclusive of Palestinians in this space. Well, now he's gone, and what's unsettling is that several weeks ago there was a rumor that the three Muslim anchors, and MSNBC is to be applauded for having even done that, that these three Muslim anchors were going to be fired. They vigorously denied that rumor, and then you see in this shakeup that actually he was on the chopping block. So I want to hear what your thoughts are about that. I mean, because now a great voice in that space has been stilled, when it comes to talking about this particular issue and just so many others. And so I want you to call me at 773-763-9278. No one could say that he didn't do fantastic work, because he did. But I don't know. We've got Dr. David Gibbs, historian from the University of Arizona. We've got Dwight McKee, and we've got, that's right, the great BJ Green. I mean, Bryce Green from Fairness and Accuracy in Reporting. Let me start with you. This is your space, Bryce Green. What do you make of his firing? Now, there was a shakeup. Michael Steele and Simone Sanders, I mean, they're gearing up for the 2024 campaign. That is what MSNBC said. So we're trying to get things together before we go into this primary season. What do you make about the cancellation of his show?
Right. Well, when this war first started, Semaphore reported, and others noticed that MSNBC took off a lot of their brown presenters. These presenters who would have had a different perspective on Palestine, and they do have a different perspective on Palestine than the rest of their lineup. Remember, when this war started, it was wall-to-wall Israeli propaganda. I mean, you would have a cable TV host sitting next to an IDF soldier. The IDF soldier would be like, "Yes, we're planning on killing all the civilians," and the anchor would be like, "You don't really mean that, do you?" The IDF would be like, "Yes, we do." And then be like, "Oh, well, they're still the most moral army in the world." They were able to, launder all the talking points of the IDF without any criticism whatsoever. Now we're seeing a bit more of that. But while they were doing that, they had put off their Muslim voices that they have on their station. Now, I was too young for this, but maybe other listeners will know. I've only read about it and talked to people about it. But in the wake of 9/11, there was a similar sentiment in the country that even being Muslim was enough to offend some viewers. And so therefore we had to exclude those voices. We had to only include voices for the audience that would be comfortable for them. This seems to be a repeat of that. And there are a lot of parallels, especially with the rhetoric and the violence that the attack was used to justify between 10/7 and 9/11. And one of those parallels, of course, is how the media simply fell in line. Remember, there was a memo that went around CNN headquarters in after 9/11 about the invasion of Iraq. It said it would, quote, be perverse to focus on civilian casualties without acknowledging that all these civilian casualties happened because of 9/11. Remember the people who attacked us. Something like that was deeply criticized by Mehdi Hassan, and he would have certainly been one of the people criticizing that today. In fact, he has been one of the people criticizing this mentality today. And kicking that voice off the air, taking it off the air, for whatever justification now is irresponsible. But given their history, there's no reason to assume the best intentions as to why he was removed. I think there's good reason to suspect that they believed that their viewers and that their base, that the people that they, who pay the bills, don't want the voice that Mehdi brings to the discussion. Now, I have a lot of criticisms of Mehdi Hassan, of the reporting, but he's done a lot of good work. And right now it seems to be purely in the racist political zeitgeist that is engulfing the country right now, this anti-Muslim rhetoric, this anti-Muslim sentiment. That seems to be the root cause of all of this.
Well, see, I'm not too young to remember what happened on MSNBC when it was an emerging network at the beginning of the Iraq War. And Dr. Gibbs and Dwight McKee, I think you recall this as well, they were pulling together. That's when you had Keith Olbermann and so many people, so many of these disparate voices, very interesting voices who you had not really seen in corporate media, who were being put on the platform. And so they coaxed Phil Donahue, the great progressive, out of retirement. He said, oh, no, since you want to have a progressive network, I'll help you to do this. And so he came out of retirement and he was anti-war. And specifically, he said he was part of the growing numbers of people in the United States and around the world who were saying, do not invade Iraq. We don't have the right to do this. It's wrong to do it. He brought on those voices to discuss that. Not that he excluded other voices, but he certainly did discuss that. Well, it was their number one show with a bullet. They fired him, Bryce. It wasn't about the viewers. It was about his viewpoint. Do you think that's what happened here?
I do agree. I mean, it's the fact that these networks largely cater to an elite audience, or at least that's who they care about what they think. And when they get calls from people in high places saying, "Why is your anchor saying all these things? Why is your anchor putting this guy on? Why is your anchor not saying this, this, and this?" Well, they do have a sense of journalistic professionalism, but, they're human beings. And if you're having someone who has significant influence calling you, telling you that they're hearing something they don't like, well, that's going to influence how you're going to decide to run your newsroom. That's just a normal human tendency. And it's reflective of the distribution of power. Now, there are a lot of people in power who are strongly supportive of Israel. There are a lot of people in power who are ardent Zionists, who believe that, either Israel is, the rightful homeland for Jewish people and that it's worth, murdering children to quote unquote defend. Or there are people who believe that Israel is an unsinkable aircraft carrier for the United States and that it's good to influence the Middle East. And they're willing to kill children to defend that. In either case, they have enough influence that they can call these networks, or they can get someone else to call these networks, or they can set up organizations like the ADL to label these networks as anti-Semitic or criticize the rhetoric coming out of the host's mouth. They have the power to do that, which means they have power to shape the incentive structure that all of these newsrooms are operating in. And so if Mehdi Hassan is saying something that's, he's no radical. He's no left-wing, communist dissident. He's, a left liberal critic and a serious one. But even that is too far for some of these organizations. And it's interesting. No one in their right mind would accuse the American media ecosystem of being biased against Israel. No one in their right mind would criticize Congress or any aspect of American society any major aspect of being biased against Israel. What these people can't tolerate is that even though the overwhelming majority of the power structure is in support of their cause, they can't tolerate any dissent. It's borderline totalitarian mentality. If 90% of what's on the cable channel is pro-Israel, well, they'll freak out about the 10% because the control has to be so total, so uninterrupted, that people shouldn't and won't be able to hear the other side. And so that's the threat that Mehdi represents. Even if he's not a radical critic, he's a serious critic. And, the Israeli project and what they're doing right now, what they've been doing for 75 years, can't be justified to a serious critic. So serious critics have to be removed.
Dr. Gibbs, what do you make of this? Are we watching censorship? What are we seeing? Because I thought about, I don't know what his ratings are, but I just remember MSNBC removed their number one show because it was anti-war, but they are also one of the biggest military munitions manufacturers on earth, owned by GE. So talk to us. What are your thoughts about this?
It's often said that, it's a cliche to say that in war, truth is always the first casualty, but it's true all the same. And, obviously we're seeing it here once again. You're getting, indeed, Israeli propaganda, not just on the airwaves, but almost total domination of the airwaves. And to the extent that there are exceptions, like Mehdi Hassan, who present different perspectives, there's an effort to close them down. And it's nothing but Israeli propaganda. And that's... We have seen this before. There's no doubt about it. When America is involved in a war, as we are indeed involved in this war, that's the tendency, is to shut down contrary opinions. I should add there's a general problem with the culture, American culture right now, that we seem to despise debate. That's unfortunately true of both sides of the aisle, both on left and right. There seems to be an intolerance for debate, an open, frank discussion. Now we're seeing it to a really extreme degree on this war. On the firing of Mehdi Hassan is only one indication of how far it's gone. He was far from being any sort of wild-eyed radical. I agree with Bryce Green that on many things he was very mainstream, and I disliked a lot of his positions. But he was presenting a different perspective on the Israel-Palestine conflict, one that needs to be brought out. And that was seen as intolerable, and that's why he was fired. No doubt I assume it's highly likely that's why he was fired. Another tendency we're seeing here is dehumanization of the chosen enemy. In this case, not just Palestinians, but it would seem people of Arab descent, or even just people who are Muslims, whether Arab or not. That's an ugly racist tendency, but yes, that does indeed happen. It's happening now. It's happening with respect to who's allowed on the air. And I suspect that was another variable here, is basically Mehdi Hassan, he's at least of Muslim descent. I don't know whether he's practicing or not. He has a Muslim-sounding name, and I think that probably it was a variable in his firing. It would seem likely. This isn't the only time we've seen this, of course. You've got a very similar dynamic playing out with regard to Russians, the Russian people, the extraordinary demonization of Russians. Why? They're the chosen enemy. That's why. And so there has to be this extraordinary tendency to make Russians, and in this case Arabs and Muslims as well, less than human, and not to see them on television if at all possible. So yes, I think those are two very unpleasant dynamics taking place. I suppose the good news is I do expect this to change. I think there is increasingly gathering disquiet. I think that'll become outrage over time, as increasingly large numbers of innocent civilians, especially children, are killed in Gaza. I think that can only go on so long before it really frankly turns people's stomachs and causes them to change their views and demand a different perspective. So I think over time, as this war continues, and it's likely to, you're going to get a tapering off of this kind of ugly tendency. At least that's the optimistic scenario, if you want to call it optimistic. I think that may well happen.
Dwight McKee, your thoughts?
Well, you have to first understand that American media is a propaganda machine of the status quo. I mean, you can go all the way back to when we were kids with Rocky and his friends, with Lucretia and Boris. You know, the Russian bad guys that they turned into little monsters. As we grew up, that was our perception of who the Russians were, because we were programmed as children to believe that. It goes into, who owns these corporate structures, Microsoft and GE, and the fact that many of them make their money off the war machine. And it goes to the fact that the strategic interest of Israel is so overwhelmingly important in the Middle East for us to maintain control of that we cannot afford to let this oil get away. And we cannot afford to have the Suez Canal vulnerable. Is all of our strategic interest is built around us having a military outpost in the Middle East. And the country, the status quo, will allow nothing to stand against that. Not truth, not freedom, not the lives of children. The whole economy of the country in their mind is dependent on us having an occupation on that side of the world. And so it's not confusing when they have a dissonant voice, or even a voice that's not singing along with the choir, that when they hear that voice and they threat only because they're objective or only because they're bringing another truth, that they will steal those voices. That is nothing new if you understand how the media works in relationship to the interests of the country.
Reverend Dr. Neary?
Well, good morning, Santita, and to your colleagues. I think to Big Brother Dwight's point, the framing and the other point, the framing of dissent is what makes a healthy democratic process. To have a different perspective, a different point of view, helps us to get the value out of what we see, what we hear, what we discuss. When you start seeing the removal of certain perspectives, it brings back the suspicion that folks have had about corporate media, where the bottom line is the driver. When you start looking at who are the investors in these shareholder-driven companies, who's sitting on the boards of directors, that really those are the interests that are being protected, not particularly what we hear is the mission of the media entity. And so I think what it forces you to do is to start looking at a couple of things. This is what, of course, Santita, your father has taught us, to start looking at who's advertising, who's sitting on the board, which companies are represented in helping to provide the cover for this kind of interest, and to start making determinations with your pocketbook, especially at this time of the year when folks are spending the money, right? This is when we try to turn the balance sheet around during the month between Thanksgiving and Christmas, that folks should be aware of who is stifling. And I don't know that it's necessarily dissent. It's stifling credibility, stifling integral conversation about what's going on. It's stifling robust discussion about human rights writ large. You cannot be about human rights and not be about human rights for everybody. That's what it means to be part of that. That's the basis of international law. And so if we're going to be about this rule of law, these themes, these cliches that often get tossed around, then these are the moments where we have to prove our commitment to those principles and make some serious determinations about do we stay or do we go. This is not a runaway train where simply because we may choose or prefer MSNBC over some other media outlet, it doesn't mean that we have to go along to get along. If there's not going to be that kind of representative, robust, distinctive kind of perspective that allows us to make informed decisions about the issues, then there are other options, and we should exercise our options and not get stuck on just kind of endorsing it by continuing to hold on for this ride, like somehow or other we'll go wherever the train is taking us, and we don't care where it stops.
If this is allowed to go on, Dr. Gibbs? Historically, I mean, just give us some historical perspective on this. Where are we going? What does that say about free speech? What does that say about America today?
Well, I think it indicates that both sides of the aisle, unfortunately, really don't value free speech. You had conservatives taking the free speech mantra, criticizing, many, in my view, misguided advocates of identity politics who wanted to ban speech. Using terms like, it makes me uncomfortable or something like that. And conservatives ridiculed that, and with some justification in some cases, and took a quote unquote moral high ground in their view. And now we're seeing how hypocritical many of them are. Many of them now are trying to shut down discussion on the war in Gaza. They're trying to get fired people like Mehdi Hassan. I don't know specifically if that was the case here, but the general tendency is it's on the right, especially, that you're getting demands basically for shutting down open discussion on college campuses, for example, with regard to the Israel-Gaza issue. And so, we're getting a real breakdown on the traditional value of open discussion and free speech. The term cancel culture is very much a bipartisan practice. Free speech for me, but not for thee. I think we need to get beyond that and establish that it's in the public interest to have free speech. Not only that people should be allowed to speak, but also allowed to hear a range of perspectives. It's vital. On something like Gaza, where, many people aren't well informed as to what's going on in Gaza. They need to hear a range of perspectives so they can make up their own minds. To some extent, what's happening here is not only unfair to individuals like Mehdi Hassan. It's not just unfair to the Palestinians because their views aren't being heard, but it's unfair to the American public because the American public is financing a lot of what is going on here. It's their money being spent. It's our money being spent. And, people have the right to know. They have the right to have information. And there's a shutting down of information right now. And that's very dangerous and fundamentally undemocratic. And it happens, unfortunately, that is a tendency of war. Yes, this did happen during the war on terror, indeed. I remember that very well. There was a shutting down of any kind of debate or discussion, a blocking of information, basic information about the historical lead-up to these things. Blocking of information is a two-way street. First of all, you block contrary information. Second of all, it's easy to disseminate, frankly, lies, things that are blatantly untrue. That's happening now. That happened during the war on terror. It also is happening, by the way, with regard to the war in Ukraine. And so one of the things that enables militaristic policies is lies and propaganda and the shutting down of discussion, which is why people do it. And and it must be opposed. It's a tendency that must be opposed.
So I don't know where it is that we go from here. It must be opposed, but it's not being opposed. I mean, Dwight, we used to have media education where, if someone like Mehdi Hassan was fired, you would, you'd start calling into the station, you'd write into the station. Do you think that will make a difference now? I've got about 30 seconds.
No, because the backlash is so intense now and the media control is so intense, is they turn the media against you. Even today, you still can't ask what happened to the third building on 9/11. 2 buildings got hit with planes and they crashed. One building didn't get hit with anything and it crashed. But you can't ask that question without being labeled as some conspiratorial maniac.
Thank you for asking that question on my show. Thank you. This is what got Rosie O'Donnell put off TV. You all remember that? When she asked that question, when she was the moderator on The View, she was put off of TV. Thank you, Dwight. I appreciate you. Go on. Thank you. Thanks for having my back. Thank you.
Well,
thank y'all.
Well, the backlash is so pronounced and so profound that they turn you into the enemy. They turn into the adversary just for asking the question, not for trying to give the answer. And so it's a very tedious tightrope that we're on now because the media is so fierce and the backlash is so intense. And they're willing to make, examples out of guys like Kanye and anybody who don't toe their party line. And you watch what happens to them, and you know that you about 1 minute from driving up that road and losing most of what you have.
But but I
so
think
there's
people,
a real.
No, I'm sorry. You were saying yes.
No, go ahead.
No, I think that people beginning to push back. I look at what happened with the $20 million offer that was given to Hill Harper. They put that out there, and that became a story. People were like, "Whoa!" Anytime AOC is calling AIPAC really a danger to the democracy, something is shifting in the zeitgeist. I mean, would you not say that, Bryce? I hope you can stay for a minute. But I know you've got class. What do you think? I've got about 30 seconds. Not even 20.
No, I think you're exactly right. Everything we're talking about is indicative of a larger culture in which information is not taken seriously by the people who are supposed to bring us the information. They think that we're children who need to be controlled, manipulated, and guided, and not active citizens who can make their own decisions about what our government is really doing.
Well, everybody, let's talk with Ray McGovern. Got a lot of questions for him at the top of the hour. Stay right here on the Santita Jackson Show. Dwight, thank you.
Anytime.
Oh my God. Okay. Well, thank you, Dee. Thank you, Dwight.
I just made an observation.
Thank you.
I just made an observation. I didn't impose a conclusion. I just made an observation.
That's right. Thank you for being the weatherman right here. I appreciate it. Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Santita?
Yeah.
Santita, I've got end of semester crunch right now, so I'm going to have to sign off.
Okay, but I'll call you a little bit later.
Yeah. Sounds good. I appreciate that. Thank you. Have a good day, everybody. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
All right, yeah, I'll be able to be here for another half hour, and then I gotta get scrambling.
Okay, well, thank you. Because I want to. Oh boy, bring this out. Okay, great. Okay. I do not like this little camera here. It does not stay where I need it to stay, you guys. And it just keeps on going. It is a pain. This is what I was given, and that is that I will make it work. Okay. All right, you all keep talking amongst yourselves because I'm doing more than one thing. More than one thing here.
Yuri, how you doing today?
I'm good, Doc. How are you?
Good. You may always make significant points.
Look, Santita lets me practice my lines and get ready for Sunday morning. What can I tell you?
Okay.
Tis important, darling. Tis important. Okay. Yes. Okay. Bring that up. Okay. Oh, okay. Let me bring that one up. So you were not surprised, Dwight, by them firing this gentleman? No.
No, I was surprised because he's quite a journalist. He's a very profound journalist. And I thought just they would at least give the impression of objectivity. And so I am a little surprised, to be honest with you.
I'm telling you, after they released Phil Donahue, I'm surprised by nothing. If you let go of your number one show, Okay.
Hello, hello.
Yes.
We have Ray McGovern on.
Oh, Mr. McGovern, how are you? Ray.
I'm great, Santita. How are you?
It's so hard for me. See, I have some people who are going to be listening to us. It's certainly for this first portion. And Dwight McKee, who it was my parents' youngest board member at Operation Push more than 50 years ago.
Uh-huh. Wow.
I had worked with my father when he was working with Dr. King as a teenager. And Reverend Dr. Todd Geary, who's part of the national leadership team at Rainbow Push. Dwight's just family at Rainbow Push. Sorry, Dwight.
Mm-hmm.
That's what happens after all this time. And then, of course, Bryce Green is from Fairness and Accuracy in Reporting. But I'm going to do a one-on-one with you. But they all admire you so much, and I wanted them to meet the great Ray McGovern. You walk and say hello, but you can't talk to him long because he belongs to me. I'm sounding like my mom now. Oh boy.
Well, I'm feeling very privileged to be on with you, Santita, and with your guests, and I just trust that I have something useful to say.
Oh my goodness.
Of course you're going to have something useful to say.
I hope that once this is over, I will still have a show, y'all. Between Dwight and 911 and the building that fell that no one saw, and Lord have mercy, and then Ray McGovern gets arrested every 5 minutes because he is fighting the power. I'm like, y'all, really? Can I just have an easier time of things? Just it would be so nice if you all would help me just stay on the air for a few minutes, but that's all right. But I tell you, I don't really worry about these things because I believe that the Lord is going to have me just where I need to be, and so I'm okay with it all.
That sounds like your dad and mom.
Really, I believe that yes. Thank you for that.
Yeah.
It is very much like them.
My grandmother, my Irish grandmother would say, you didn't get it from the moon.
Well, now that's the irony of ironies. My father's great-grandfather's Irish, and he raised his mother in part. Yes. Yes. And it's so funny. So many of these sayings, you think that you think they actually come from a particular space. No. We got to Ireland and found that a lot of these sayings that Grandma Helen had, Dwight, were from her Irish grandfather, who raised her in part.
My last name is McKee, but I'll leave that alone.
No, you can't. You can't leave alone. Because guess what? That's America.
Well,
back in 30.
I was being interviewed just this past week about how the British helped scuttle the arrangement, the truce, the treaty that had been worked out between Ukraine and Russia just 6 weeks after the Russian invasion. And people asking me about the British, and I said, well, I'll just tell you what my Irish grandfather told me. He said, Raymond, do you know
Stand by.
why the sun never sets on the British Empire?
Change the world, change the world. We can change the world, we can change the world, change the world.
This is the Santita Jackson Show.
War and hate to a place of love, it's not too late. Gotta save the children, we can't wait. Let's change the world.
Hey everybody, welcome back to the Santita Jackson Show. Special guest today, Ray McGovern, a CIA officer turned political activist. Really, he was a CIA analyst from I think it was 63 to 1990, and prepared the president every morning. And so he comes to us with a wealth of understanding, a wealth of knowledge about how the world actually works. And I'm so excited to have him whenever I get a chance to speak with him on the air or personally. I walk away, I just think just feeling empowered and better. And I hope that he will, I know that he'll be that gift to you too. So everybody, let's sit back and listen to what he has to say about the Middle East and where we are right now, because there are a lot of questions that I have, that we all have. Dwight McKee's listening in, Bryce Green's listening, and Reverend Dr. Todd Deary. Everybody wanted to weigh in. I said, but I have to limit everything because we want to listen, but there's some questions that I want to get to. So as we do that, let me get to some of these headlines. The pause in fighting between Israel and Hamas is over. The pause, which took effect a week ago, allowed for an exchange of hostages held by Hamas and Palestinian prisoners. Some people call them hostages because many of them were children who were just throwing rocks. It expired this morning. We'll see where we go from here. A gag order on Donald Trump was reinstated in his New York fraud case. An appeals court yesterday upheld a judge's order that prevents the former president from making public comments about court staff in the civil case. The order was issued after former President Trump posted a photo of an employee that the judge said led to threats against said employee. Wow, everybody. In Chicago, we'll have a high of 44 degrees today. It is already raining. We're expecting rain for the rest of the day. In Minneapolis, St. Paul, 36 degrees, mostly cloudy. In the NBA, the Bulls 120, the Bucks 113, the Timberwolves 101, the Jazz 90. In the NFL, well, last night the Cowboys pulled it out against the Seahawks, 41-35. In the NHL, the Red Wings 5, Chicago 1, the Wild 6, the Predators 1. Ray McGovern, welcome back to the show. A man who really needs no introduction. For those of us who really understand his story, would you tell us what you did in the CIA? Let's start there.
Sure, Santita. I was drawn down to Washington from my native Bronx in New York by John Kennedy, who said, maybe there's something you can do for your country, and don't be always asking what your country can do for you. Now, that didn't sound corny at the time, Santita. It wasn't corny. It was a new beginning. It was very refreshing. I heard about this agency that had been sort of newly created, and its job was to tell the president what was going on abroad without fear or favor. As Truman put it, who actually created the agency, he said he wanted intelligence that was not treated, his word, treated by policy considerations on the part of the State Department or on part of the Defense Department. He wanted to be able to look at somebody and say, I want you to tell me it's straight. You work for me. I have your career protection, so tell me what's going on. Now, that's strange sounding to people today, but that worked for me as a Russian analyst, a Soviet analyst from, as you said, 1963, not till 1990, but about 1985, when even the intelligence analysis part of the agency started to become corrupted. So, long story short, that played out when my former colleagues, my God, it still pains me to say this, my former colleagues deliberately falsified, manufactured, conjured up, quote, intelligence, end quote, to justify the war of aggression in Iraq. And it went downhill from there. And I established or helped to co-create a group called Veteran Intelligence Professionals for Sanity. There was no sanity much in Washington in those days. And but, you know, we've been writing to presidents ever since Colin Powell told all those lies before the UN. That same day, we told the president, forget about it. You don't need to go to war. He didn't listen. So right now, we're busily engaged in things like Ukraine, but especially Gaza. And what pains me to say is that our government is the great enabler here. Let me just say it this way. Israel could not possibly do what it's doing. It wouldn't think of doing what it's doing in Gaza if it didn't feel that it had the full-throated support of the United States. Biden has given the Israelis that full-throated support. One of his acolytes, little Blinken, flitted around yesterday, talking to the Israelis. Please, when you resume the genocide.
Around? Oh, you're serious?
Well, yeah, I mean, when you resume the genocide, and I use that term advisedly, it's a textbook case of genocide against the Palestinians in Gaza. When you please do it in a humane way. Now the humane pause is over, but please try to respect the people that live there and don't kill them all. Well, he failed, and this morning, as the news item indicated, we're at it again. Last thing I'll say, sorry we talk so long here, but what's missing here? Well, it was another genocide that I'm old enough to have lived during that period. I was born a week before World War II. I know about the 6 million Jews. That was genocide. That was abhorrent. That was injustice in spades, okay? Now, what am I referring to as something that troubles me a lot about that? It is that people of faith, Catholics, Lutherans in Germany, could not find their voice, and neither could the Pope. And so it was allowed to continue. 6 million is a lot of people, okay? Now, where are the spiritual leaders now? Does it have to be 6 million? Can it be, quote, only, end quote, 2 million in Gaza? No one is speaking out except people like Jewish Voice for Peace, which I'm proud to be a member of. They have a conscience. They're speaking out. But my point is, where are the Catholic bishops? Where are the other moral leaders that claim a leadership role in morality and religion? Their voices are silent. And as I say, it's on us. I'll just finish with this little quote, which is a very bracing quote, but it's from one of my favorite prophets, and his name was Abraham Heschel. You know about him. He marched with your dad and the others, okay? And what he said was this: when injustice takes place, few are guilty, but all are responsible. Indifference to evil is more insidious than evil itself. End quote. I'll leave it there. We cannot be indifferent to what's going on now. It is shameful. And as I say, only the United States, only the people in Washington have the power to stop it. All they have to do is say, stop it, or we won't give you any more arms or any more money. Stop it. And it would stop.
Why won't we stop it? I mean, I know the president is a self-declared Zionist, right? I know Anthony Blinken went there, and the first thing he announced right after October 7th was, first I'm coming to you as a member of the Jewish community. Was that the thing to do? Yeah. Did you say that?
Santita, you put your finger right on it. The Zionists, I'm not saying Jewish, I'm saying Zionist here, and I hope your listeners know the difference.
What is the difference?
The Zionist influence, Zionist is a political movement. Zionism has nothing to do with the Jewish religion. It's an abhorrent thing for people who believe in the Yahweh of the Hebrew Scriptures. I mean, let's put it this way. We talk about the Abrahamic traditions, Santita, and of course that embraces not only the Hebrews, not only the Christians, but also the Muslims, okay? And what was it that this Yahweh of the Old Testament and Jesus of Nazareth and the prophet, what did they care about most of all? It's very clear. Heschel said it himself: we do justice, that we take care of the widow, the orphan, the refugee. Now, this is going to be a bracing thought to most of you, but why has Hamas been so popular in Gaza? Because they take care of the widow, the orphan, refugee. That's why they have so many hospitals. That's why they won the election in 2005, hands down, to the surprise of everyone. The PLO, the the Palestine Liberation Organization in the West Bank was so corrupt, no one voted for them. So, this is not to excuse the excesses or the terrible, terrible stuff that they did on October 7th. But I just say, as the Secretary General of the UN said, it didn't happen in a vacuum. Now, what do I mean by that? Well, I'm a pretty old guy, right? And so I was 9 years old in the Bronx, New York, growing up there when a great event happened. It was 1948. And the Jews, the persecuted Jews, had a state, had a country of their own to go to. And there was great rejoicing. There were bands and parades. We all rejoiced, right? Everyone, whether we were Jewish or not. But no one told me, Santita, no one told me that there were people already there, that there were 700,000 at least Palestinians driven off their land, out of their homes, and half of them ended up in Gaza. And the people there now are the direct descendants of those people who were driven out of what had been Palestine. So, when you come right down to it, you have to realize that this goes back, 1948, what's that, 70 years or so, 75 years? I'll just say again what the Secretary General of the UN said. It didn't happen in a vacuum. I've been there. I was on the West Bank. I saw how Palestinians were treated there. I saw how these alabaster cities on the top of these hills from the, quote, settlers with their sprinklers, making sure the grass was so green, whereas down at the bottom of the hill in the Palestinian village, there was no running water. I've seen that, and I've been shot at by Israeli settlers with a group that we went to Palestine 6 years ago. A little group, 9 people from Veterans for Peace. I could talk more about that, but that was a real eye opener. You have to be there to see how people are suppressed and how non-violently they can react. A lot of them now are in prison.
We're talking with Ray McGovern, former CIA operative, co-founder of Veteran Intelligence Professionals for Sanity, telling us really how all of this works, how the world really works. I mean, I'd like you to help me to understand how we got here. I mean, you've explained that Hamas, while they do, if what they did on October 7th was heinous. That having been said, there's a context. I've heard several people say, look, it did not begin October 7th. It really began 75 odd years ago. Would it have made a difference to you and to many Americans if 75 years ago you knew that people were already there when Israel was settled?
Well, it certainly would. Young as I was, 9 years old at the time, if somebody told me, well, this is a mixed blessing. It's really great that the persecuted Jews after World War II have a place to go, but they're throwing other people out of their homes. They're driving other people out of the area that they lived in for centuries, if not millennia. I mean, my God, so this is a two-edged sword here. If they told me that, I certainly would have, young as I was, had mixed feelings about it. But they didn't tell me that. And not many Americans know that. And that goes to one of the core reasons for all this, that not only do Zionists dominate our government, Joe Biden, as you mentioned, Santita, a self-declared supreme Zionist, Blinken arrives in Israel and says, I'm a Jew. Now, that seems so extraordinary. Why? Because if the U.S. is pretending to play an even-handed role here as mediator, or at least have some influence on both sides, why would he say he's a Jew? I mean, the Jewish people, the Zionist people, I correct myself, have dominated policymaking in the Middle East ever since I knew about policymaking in the Middle East. But none of them started out by saying, I'm a Jew. What was that all about? Well, it just shows that he's so insensitive to the problem here. And the fact that he's a Jew in the religious sense means nothing. He's a Zionist, and that's different. Those are the people that kicked the Palestinians out of their homeland 75 years ago.
Well, what does it say to, this former, he wasn't just an Obama official, he worked in several administrations. This gentleman who was in the State Department, who was harassing Palestinian or Arab vendors in New York, saying that 4,000 children ditched enough. Who is working in the State Department?
The State Department is peopled by folks that came in previous administrations, and now the Zionist administration of Tony Blinken, who's the Secretary of State. That was an egregious example of one of the former workers in the Obama administration who lost it. He has these deep-seated racial feelings that came out just because this guy didn't look like an American or a Zionist. He looked like a Palestinian, for God's sake, and so he reamed them out. It was caught on tape, as most people know. It's a really good example of how when people don't look like you, or don't look like the majority of you, well, you know what that's called. That's called racism, pure and simple. And you think by now people would be sensitized to the fact when Israeli leaders say, well, these are human animals, these Palestinians, we're going to get rid of them. And as I say, we have ethnic cleansing going on now. We have collective punishment. And worst of all, we have a textbook case of genocide. Genocide, gens, the word for tribe or people. Homicide, you're going to kill a whole tribe or a whole ethnic group of people. And, here's an example that I came upon this past week talking about these things, Santita. Maybe it will relate to others who know a little bit about World War II. Now, during World War II, the French sort of caved, right? The Germans rolled in, and the French set up this Vichy government. They collaborated with the Germans, but there was a small group of French resistance people, right? And the resistance did what resistance groups do. They took out after the Nazis every chance they got. Okay, now, did anyone say in those days that, the Vichy government, the Nazi-dominated government in Paris, they have a right to defend themselves from the resistance? Yeah, they have a right to defend themselves. Of course not, because they were occupiers. They had no right to defend themselves from the people in France who were trying to free France. Well, the analogy, of course, is that the Israelis do not have the right to defend themselves in Gaza. Gaza is internationally recognized as occupied territories. There is a resistance there. Now, I don't defend the bloodiness of what happened on October 7th, but the Israelis cannot claim the right to defend themselves in Gaza because since World War II, it's become even more explicit in international law that people in occupied territories are to be protected by the occupier, not killed or wiped off the map.
We're talking with Ray McGovern, former CIA analyst, co-founder of Veteran Intelligence Professionals for Peace. I know that you've got to run to class, Bryce Green. I got a couple of minutes. Would you like to make a comment or ask a question?
All right. Yeah. Thank you for everything that you've done, Ray. Thank you for Veterans Intelligence Professionals for Peace. VIPS has been extremely helpful. But I do have a question about the context that led up to 10/7 and what actually happened that day and what people are telling you and what you've read and what you understand. Yesterday, the New York Times published an article that the Israelis knew of Hamas's plans, very specific plans, this military operation to go into multiple military bases in Israel and take hostages as a military operation. New York Times reported that Israel had these plans, but allegedly they ignored them. This is included in or this adds to a wide body of evidence showing advanced warnings of the attacks, and warnings from the Egyptians. The American intelligence community had advanced warning. Even Israeli soldiers on the border had advanced warnings. And then you go into the details of what actually happened on the day 10/7. There are credible reports of the use of Israeli tank shelling and Apache helicopters that contributed to the large number of civilian casualties. As of now, it's impossible to tell how many people were killed by Israel and how many people were killed by Hamas and how many people were killed by other militant groups and even just randos who had streamed over the border. So I'm curious what you think of all of this evidence, what you make of it, and how it reflects on the current situation and the parallels between this and other major attacks in world history.
And everybody, you're going to have to hold on to get that answer on the other side of the break, which means you're going to have to run to class. Bryce, you're going to have to wait because I want you to hear what Ray McGovern has got to say. They said they knew very, very in great detail what was going to happen. And then when you see that the IDF waited hours to respond to these attacks, we have a lot of questions. Talking with Ray McGovern here on the Santita Jackson Show. Call us at 773-763-9278. Back in just a minute. Oh, yeah, you're going to ask that question as we're going into break. I don't think so, Bryce. You got to wait.
Great. That was a terrific question. I hope that you can hang around to see my stab at answering it.
Okay, well, I'll hang around. I'll be on the move, but I'll hang around.
Okay, just put us on mute so we don't hear all the whole campus behind us. But hey, I think that's important. And I have so look, you went right to the heart of Iraq and said that this was about oil. I want to know if this is about religion or resources with all this gas off the coast of Gaza. Is that what this is? Or maybe I should ask that on the
partly
air.
about it. Yeah. Mm-hmm. I think Biden's Department of Energy has sent someone, and they're having meetings right now about expanding natural resource mining in the Gaza Strip.
Well, they're still mining, even with the war. They're making money.
Yeah, there was a recent report that deposits of oil have been found there as well. But offshore, there are certainly natural gas deposits that are to be either shared or dominated by Israel. We'll have to see how that works out.
Yes, and the Israelis have joined with the British energy companies, and they have squeezed the Palestinians out of their share of those profits. It's just when you start digging down, it's amazing. It's amazing. Dwight McKee, Reverend Dr. Yuri, Dwight, you're awfully quiet during this break.
I'm listening, but I do have a question. I really want to hear what your grandfather told you why the sun never sets on the British Empire.
Oh, thanks. I told him I know. He said, you don't know. He'll sit you down and I'll tell you. He said, the sun never sets on the British Empire because the good Lord would never trust the British in the dark.
Oh my goodness, spoken like a true Irishman. Oh my gosh.
2 minutes.
It's the God honest truth, Santita and Bryce.
I think that might have been JFK's problem. He had too much of that in his mind. Oh my, you guys are too much. I mean, Dwight, be quiet because you're still in the margins here. Okay. Dwight will say things that'll get you put off the air. Between Ray McGovern, no, Dwight. Between Ray McGovern and Dwight McKee, I want to have a show, y'all. I really do. Go on, Dwight.
I do have one other quick question for him. McGovern, you were talking about how the British sabotaged the truce between the Russians and the Ukrainians. Can you
Correct.
elaborate on that for a minute?
Oh, sure. Yeah, it's clear now. In addition to Angela Merkel, Chancellor of Germany, Francois Hollande, head of France, now we have the Ukrainian negotiator, part of Zelensky's party, getting up and saying publicly, yeah, I signed that thing. It was all ready to go at the end of March. And the British came in at U.S. behest and said, this is not about you guys.
Back in 30.
It's about weakening Russia. If you don't continue the struggle, we won't support you for as long as it takes. And so the whole thing folded on the 1st of April, curiously enough, April Fool's Day, for God's sake, when the Ukrainians said, no thanks. We don't want this truce. We agree to make ourselves neutral and to not join NATO, but that's off the table now. We're going to fight this out. And the sorrowful thing, of course, is that people say tens of thousands of people perished.
We can change the world, change the world.
This is the Santita Jackson Show.
War and hate to a place of love, it's not too late. Gotta save the children, we can't wait. Let's change the world.
Hey everybody, welcome back to the Santita Jackson Show, WCPT 820, the nation's largest progressive talk radio station, at AM 950 Radio, the voice of progressive Minnesota, and the Santita Jackson Show YouTube channel. Meet my morning stars over there. And as you do, wish Carol Soskin a happy birthday. She told us about her birthday at the end of the show, so no one got a chance to wish my sister from another mister happy birthday. I love you, Carol Soskin, getting up there first thing in the morning in the hills of Beverly. We love you, Carol. Everybody wish her a happy birthday. We're talking with Ray McGovern. Oh boy, former CIA analyst. Really someone who is a seminarian, who has really taken it upon himself, and along with other veteran intelligence professionals for sanity, to help us to be sane, because you can only be sane when you have truth. He said, no, you've been told a good many falsehoods, and we're going to correct them, and we're going to speak truth to power and challenge them. Of course, he also briefed the president, so he's got some bona fides, everybody. So he was asked a question just succinctly in about 30 seconds or less. There was a New York Times report that came out yesterday that detailed the specificity with which, Israel knew, right? Bryce Green, they knew. They've been warned. They've been warned by the Egyptians, and they've been warned by their own intelligence. Bryce.
Right. There seems to be extensive reason to believe that the Israeli military structure had warnings of the attacks. The excuse seems to be that this might have been, a classic case of military failures, as the case of 9/11. But, even Netanyahu has suggested that, this attack was deliberately allowed to happen, and that was a result of political rivals within the Israeli state. And again, if you look back at 9/11, we learned a lot more after these initial reports. We got a look at the documentary record. We got a look at how the CIA and Alex Station was a black hole for information about the hijackers that they knew were in the United States. So there is certainly precedent for a confusing and mysterious event like this, pointing the finger, at least to some degree, at our own intelligence community, at their own intelligence community. And so I'm wondering if there is good reason to suspect that something like that has occurred here. And combined with the other reports talking about how 10/7, the attacks, were not what they were initially reported, and that there are credible reports from Israeli press demonstrating that there was a significant degree of crossfire that resulted in the high civilian casualties. In fact, at one point, Israel believed that they had burned, beyond recognition, over 200 of their own people before they realized that they were actually, Palestinians, and then they revised their estimates down. So I'm curious what you make of this pattern of facts and how you relate it to other events in American or world history.
Well, Bright, those are really excellent questions. Let me try to answer the first one first. Whether it was deliberately ignored, these reports, which were copious, that Hamas was about to do something, or whether Hamas had adopted such tight security procedures as to be able to plan this thing and conduct it as a complete surprise, the jury is out. The false flag kind of thing, that's a tenable hypothesis in my view, but I lean toward the total surprise on the part of the top leaders in Israel, who either weren't completely informed or preferred not to be informed. And you know, when you're at the top and you try to discourage people from telling you bad news, well, they keep it at their level, and these things happen. So I don't know the real answer to that. You're quite right in pointing out that it's very suspicious that this could happen. The more so since so much, including from the Egyptians, was made available to the British, to the Israelis. I don't know the complete answer, but I lean to the total surprise. And you know, the Hamas was really smart in knocking out all those electronic devices, and they had a couple of years to prepare. So that's where I lean. Now, on the charred bodies, those came from Apache helicopters built in the United States. They came from Israelis flying them, and some of those pilots have admitted it. They fired on every car that was leaving that concert. They fired on anything they could fire on because there might be Hamas there. Did they kill hostages? Of course they did. So this business about the 1,400 first was the casualty rate. Now it's 1,200. That's because some 200 of those were Hamas leaders. So how many of those Israelis were killed by Hamas? Well, we think about half of that 1,200. The other half were done in by the Israelis, who have a policy of shooting up anyone who is an enemy, and if they happen to be shooting up civilians, including Israeli civilians in the process, that's okay. We'll blame it on Hamas anyway, and that's what accounted for those charred bodies that could only result from the kind of missiles that Apache helicopters and Israeli tanks use.
Did that help you out, Bryce?
Absolutely. And, you know, in addition to the charred bodies, there was also, a tank crew that rolled into the kibbutz, and there was a lot of instances of crossfire. And then the charges that Hamas targeted a music festival seemed to be completely debunked by the fact that the music festival was planned to be in a completely different location that day. And it was only changed 2 days before the actual attack. And so, and even, I think it just goes to show the extent to which we exist in a propaganda system that's incapable of incorporating new facts into pre-digested narratives. People, I have people telling me today, Hamas killed 1,400 civilians, and they're evil, and they targeted them. And they have no idea that, a large number, about 400 of those, the number of the 1,200 were actually military officials, were actually soldiers. And what's very clear is that even if you accept the false premise that Hamas was responsible for every single death that day, the ratio of military personnel to civilians killed is still far, far more in the favor of military operation than what Israel's response has been, which even according to their own estimates, something like 90 to 95% of the casualties in Gaza are civilians. So for every, one Hamas fighter they claim to kill, they claim to kill, over a dozen, maybe even 20 civilians. And so it's difficult to have a rational conversation about 10-7, what should be our response to it, when the basic facts of the case are being distorted, manipulated, and, it's pretty obvious why. They're justifying a policy that they've had for years and years and years. But our media system seems to be incapable of handling it.
Well,
yes, I would say, Bright, that it's not so much incapable. It's thoroughly influenced by Zionist people who have inordinate or disproportionate control of the media. And the same goes for our Congress. The Israel lobby can get people elected, and they can get people removed. There's Andy Levin from the Levin family out there in Michigan. I mean, he lost the primary. So the Israel lobby is involved in primaries now in the Democratic Party. So, the media and the Congress are influenced by this Zionist spirit, and that's why Netanyahu can brag, as he did just 20 years ago in a video thing that he thought the video camera was off. What he said was this: "We have to make it so painful. We have to make chaos for the Palestinians so they'll leave." And the hostess says, "Well, won't international people criticize us for that?" And he says, look, America is what counts. We have such influence in America. 80% of the people support us. It's absurd, period, end quote, out of the mouth of Bibi. The video is available on YouTube. Okay, now if that's his attitude, and if he considers that Blinken is just a little acolyte making motions and doesn't really matter because Biden's going to support whatever Bibi does, then we bear a responsibility here to speak up, get out in the streets, and make sure that we get a ceasefire that lasts this time, because indifference to evil is more insidious than evil itself, Rabbi Heschel.
How are we being?
Amen.
How is the United States being impacted internationally? You've seen Putin, you've seen the Chinese government say this is a red line. What you're doing to the Palestinians is wrong. In fact, you're not going to have a resolution to this crisis until they get justice. I mean, the emerging superpowers of the world are really lining up against the United States. Or am I misreading this?
Well, no, you're exactly right. And, I'm embarrassed. I mean, I love my country. I served it in uniform. I served it for 30 years as an intelligence. I mean, it's so embarrassing for me to say that there's a genocide going on, and it couldn't happen without the support of my country, my, quote, elected representatives, end quote, and my president. Now, the whole world sees that as well. This is going down as not only an embarrassment, but the kind of reverse in standing that it would be really hard to recoup. And worse still, how long will it be before the surrounding Arab countries and Turkey and Iran say that's enough? These are Palestinians. We're going to defend them. We're not going to let 2 million be genocided, okay? We're going to stop it now and intervene. Then what happens? Does the U.S. come in with those aircraft carriers that they have in the Med, with that submarine? It's really very volatile now. I applaud the restraint exercised so far by the governments in that area that are heavily populated by Palestinian people driven out in 1948. But how long that patience can last, how long they can resist the pressures from these Palestinians that live in their countries, is an unknown question. So it's more a matter of losing stature diplomatically. It's a matter of becoming involved in defending our, quote, ally, end quote, Israel, to the detriment of our own interests, as has been the case below these 75 years.
Well, what is the end game here? I mean, now hostilities have resumed, although the IDF was shooting at people who were going back to northern Gaza. They wanted to go home. And they've been shooting at people in the south. Settlers are attacking Palestinians of the West Bank. It's not like hostilities really ceased, Ray Montgomery.
No, they're intensifying now. And those people they drove out of northern Gaza are now subjected to strikes from the air in southern Gaza. Even hospitals are being shelled again. This is just so bad that someone needs to rise up. And as I say, lacking a religious or a moral leadership here in this country, there's only us You know, my favorite theologian, Annie Dillard, says, you know, there's only us. There never has been any other. I live in this little dorf here called Raleigh, North Carolina. I say dorf, it's a really small town. Yeah, it's the capital, but it's a small town. 3,000 Palestinian supporters came out twice last week. I spoke at one of those gatherings, and they all had the keffiyehs on, okay? And one of the leaders said, now, how many here have no real connection to Palestine at all? 90% of the people had their hands raised up. So there are people who care about justice. It's just a matter of mobilizing them, as your dad and mom did so well, Santita, in the past, and saying, hey, look, you know, indifference to evil is really, really bad. It's worse than evil itself. I mean, that's a truism, but it needs to be inculcated in Americans who need to speak out.
We're talking with Ray McGovern, CIA analyst, veterans intelligence, former CIA analyst, briefed the president, co-founder of Veteran Intelligence Professionals for Sanity. It's amazing that this can go on. Dwight McKee, do you have a question or comment?
No, I'm listening very closely, trying to pull the pieces together so we can see the inconsistencies. And it's very suspicious that Israel has some of the most sophisticated intelligence in the world, and yet this thing went on 5 or 6 hours at the convenience of Netanyahu, who was at the time almost thrown out of office and under investigation for crimes. And so even if it was not planned by him, or even it was not suspected by him, it really worked his benefit, because it locked him in office and it gave him a pretext to do what he had been trying to do anyway, which is that ethnic cleansing of Gaza.
Well, Reverend Dr. Uri, before I pivot to you, let me ask you this, Ray McGovern. Are we more vulnerable? Is America more vulnerable to terrorist activity? We see what happened up in Pennsylvania at the Aliquippa Water Authority, the cyber attack. They said that the safety of the water was not attacked, just access to it. But I'm wondering if we're not more vulnerable than we're even understanding, because people feel that America's at the center of this.
Well, Santita, again, you put your finger on it. Yeah, of course we are. You know, if people don't care about the justice issue of all this, or the injustice, well, think about self-interest. Did those terrorists attack us on 9/11 because they hate our freedom? Give me a break. It's very, very clear. Khalid Sheikh Mohammed, the mastermind of this whole thing, was caught while the 9/11 Commission report was being written. And on page 147, look it up, they asked him why he did it. And he said, you know, I didn't do it because of any bad experience I had studying in University of North Carolina, Greensboro. I did it because of my extreme hatred for U.S. policy favoring Israel. Now, so did Osama bin Laden, for God's sake, a couple of years previously, and so did Ramzi Youssef, the nephew of Khalid Sheikh Mohammed, who was condemned or sentenced to something like 140 years. At his sentencing, he said, I'm glad I did this because somebody needed to do something. He tried to knock down the Twin Towers in 1993. He was convicted. He said, I'm glad I did it because of my extreme hatred for the policy of the United States supporting Israel no matter what. I wanted to show the American people that that's not tolerated by people of justice. So, yeah, of course it's going to redound here. The FBI is now warning, well, we need more people because they're going to be terrorists. Well, there probably will be. But if there are, and I'm not condoning it, I'm just saying, look, it will not happen in a vacuum, right? There are reasons why people feel really strongly against us, and it's not because they hate our freedom.
Well, what do you make of Netanyahu saying that America and Europe, you're next?
Oh, yeah. Well, in one sense, he's right. I mean, to the degree Europe and America condone what he's doing, there will be terrorism. It happened last time, okay? But what he's really trying to do is this propaganda thing. Look, these terrible people that don't look like us. That's key, folks. Got that? These terrible people don't look like us. They're going to get you guys, too, because lots of people don't look like us in Europe, not to mention the United States. That goes to what James Baldwin wrote to Angela Davis when she was captured. This is what he said, quote, let me put it this way. As long as white Americans take refuge in their whiteness, they will allow millions of other people to be slaughtered. So long as their whiteness puts so sinister a distance between their own experience and the experience of others, they will never feel themselves sufficiently worthwhile to become responsible for themselves. As we once put it in a black church, they will perish in their sins, that is, in their delusions. Well, that was 1970. Open letter to my sister, Miss Angela Davis. Okay? It's true now in a way that's even more insidious than it was then.
Reverend Dr. Yeary, we're going to be going out. I hope Ray McGovern will stay with us just for a couple of minutes just after we get off the air here. Your thoughts?
Well, there are a lot of thoughts. There's pretext. There's expendability for a larger outcome, and then there's the manipulation that comes from land grabs and colonial mindset. When we talk about natural resource and the ability to control and seize, and what efforts are used, it took me back to the rules that set the Berlin Conference. That in the colonization of the continent, the two determinations, the ground rules of monopoly, if you will, were one, you had to have an established economic interest in the area you wanted to colonize, and then you had to have the military wherewithal to protect it. And so if we look at an extension of what we've seen from the colonization movement throughout history, particularly as it has been often overseen by the United States, if not directly led by the United States, it raises an air of suspicion, right? So you can't this isn't just an event detached from other events. It's placed within a continuum of a historical context that causes you to just go, Well, to quote Arsenio Hall from back in the day.
On that note, hold on. I have a couple of minutes before we go off the air. The last 2 minutes belong to you, Ray McGovern.
Well, I can't agree more. Economic interest and the military wherewithal. I mean, we have to go back centuries to see the beginning of that, but those centuries count. What I would cite is the first policy planning document prepared by the newly created State Department Policy Planning Group, written by George Kennan, 1948. And what he said was this: we, the United States, have risen from this war, this carnage, with domain over 50% of the world's resources. The problem is we only comprise 9% of the world's population. And so we can't be deceived. We can't be misled by soft issues like human rights or things like that. It will come to the exercise of hard power to defend this equilibrium, this disproportionate ownership we have over the natural resources of the world. Now, that was 1948. It hasn't changed very much, but the game is over. The rest of the world is looking at the lily white West. They remember what happened centuries ago, and they're not going to put it up with. They're not going to put up with it anymore. The U.S. is no longer the indispensable or even exceptional country. Problem is that Biden, Blinken, Sullivan, and Nuland had not got that through their thick skulls yet.
I was going to ask you, do they know that? Because they walk around the world as if, it's like,
that's the question. Do they know that? Well, I used to think, they can't know that because they're reasonably bright. They come from the best schools, right, Santita? Okay, well,
They didn't
Well,
go to
you know,
Howard. I
then
don't
you
know
have the
what you're
president-
talking about. Excuse me.
No, I meant the pretentious
Yeah,
best.
absolutely. Yes.
But you know, just listen to the president talk about praising Madeleine Albright and her coining of the word "we are indispensable, we are exceptional, and we have to lead." He said that 2 days after he came back from Israel this past month. My God, I think he's a pretty old guy. I don't think he's as compass mentis as even I am, right? But he appears to believe that. And these guys that never wore a uniform and have been told that they're elitist and privileged and the United States is entitled to their large share of the resources, these guys are not going to tell them that the U.S. is anything other than indispensable. They got to learn the hard way, I hope, not with a whole lot more violence.
Well, I want you to stay with me on the other side just for a couple of minutes. You got to tell me about Henry Kissinger. Your thoughts. That's why you need to be on the Santita Jackson Show YouTube channel, everybody. I'll see you on Keep Up Alive on Sunday. God bless you. Henry Kissinger, your thoughts. Speaking of indispensable.
Well,
I knew.
I gotta go.
Oh, you have to go?
Hey, thanks very much.
Oh, okay.
Yes.
Oh, I didn't know you were still there, Bryce. Oh, okay. You're about to miss out, Bryce, but you can go to YouTube and get this. Okay.
Okay.
All right, sweetie.
All right, take it easy.
Absolutely. I didn't realize Bryce was still there. But Henry Kissinger, your thoughts, the indispensable one, the one who felt that he was worried about going into rooms where African leaders were because he was worried about the smell, the one who questioned the intellectual capacity of Black people. These are the stories that we don't hear about, but Les Payne sure did talk about it, that the great Black journalist, one of the founders of the NABJ, in a tremendous piece that has been published, republished. Of course, Les Payne has been gone from us for far too long. But Henry Kissinger, Nobel Peace Prize winner. Look, people want my father to get the Nobel Peace Prize. They're like, with all the work that he's done, I'm like, I don't want him to get that. This is not the same award Dr. King got. I said, no. Everybody who gets it now drops the bomb and kills a lot of people. Leave us alone, please. Or maybe I'm misreading it. I don't know.
No, I applaud your instincts here. Let's face it, Henry Kissinger is a war criminal.
Okay.
Just look at Cambodia and what happened in Cambodia and Vietnam, continuing the war. How many Vietnamese perished in that war? We know. Former Defense Secretary Robert McNamara says 3 million. Talk about genocide. In my view, that qualifies. Now, there's always a but. Okay, did Kissinger do anything good? Well, my personal experience with Kissinger is such that I have to give him credit for playing the Chinese and the Russians off one against the other and being able to come up with the best arms control measure ever, called the Anti-Ballistic Missile Treaty. I was involved in that. I had 3 people in my branch that were dedicated, one with the delegations in Helsinki or Vienna, one down in the bowels of the building here at Langley, liaising and learning from the military specialists, the other preparing reports for our director and the president. I got to go to Moscow for the signing of that treaty. It was May 1972. How was it possible? Because Kissinger, in a word, had scared the bejesus out of the Russians because he had gone to Beijing. Nixon had gone to Beijing, and the Russians were deathly afraid that the Chinese and the U.S. would have an alliance against Russia. So here I am, the chief of the Russian, the Soviet foreign policy branch at the time, and Kissinger says, do the Russians, are they serious? Are they serious about arms control? And we say, yes, they are. Well, how do you know that? And we say, well, because they don't want to spend themselves into oblivion, and they know that we have the edge in economic matters. He said, well, all right. Now, if we conclude a treaty, will you be able to tell us if the Russians cheat? And we said, well, how much time do you need for us to tell you? And he said, well, find out how long it would be before the Russians. We know the Russians. So we went to the people that run our satellites and all the other collection devices, and they said, well, we'll know if they build a big radar in violation of the ABM treaty, the anti-ballistic missile treaty. We'll know within 10 days. We went back to Kissinger and said, about 10 days. He said, all right, we'll go ahead. And they did. And they signed this thing, and it was the bedrock of international security for 3 decades. Count them. 72 until 2002, when little Georgie Bush decided that, well, maybe we'll get out of that treaty. And things went downhill from there. So Kissinger he was clever, okay? And when it suited our interests to keep a stable strategic environment, he had the good sense to make the deals. And Scott Ritter, my good friend, can put chapter and verse on that, because as he points out in his article just today, Kissinger listened to him. You know, Kissinger valued his voice because he knew which end was up. He was a UN inspector, and he could give him the right story. So it's a mixed deal. But you know, being a war criminal, you know, it's hard to expiate for that by doing clever things diplomatically. That's my take on Henry Kissinger.
But why is he so? Yes, Dwight.
Why is he so what?
Why is he so? I mean, he is iconic in a certain space. Is it because he was a complete servant of empire? I mean, what is it? Because it seems everything is upside down. Everything is upside down. Yeah. If you are a servant of empire, you are honored. And of course, these mechanisms that we watch on, television, this is what they control. But, you know, in Dr. King's lifetime, vilified. In real time, while Bernie Sanders is running, they push him out the race. They try to do that with Reverend. I mean, you just keep on going. And yet these are the figures who are honored by the world. They represent the best of America, right? What's going on here? I mean, it's just upside down. I mean, because when we were with President Macron over in France, when Reverend got the Legion of Honor award a couple of years ago, he did something that was very unusual because, you know, the French are, you know, very, you know, they're quite adherent to protocol. It took almost 2 hours for the ceremony to begin, which, you know, complete breach of protocol, which we were fine with it. We didn't know. Knowing my father, knowing how things tend to go, people always want to pick his brain and talk to him. And he was far better able to communicate more fluidly at that time. And indeed, the president kept him. And he kept saying in the speech, when he introduced Reverend and gave him the award, he said, I just want to know what is in your mind. How did you come out of an apartheid America and become you? What is in he said, and I want you all to know, I asked him if there was anything I could do for you. He said, do right by Haiti. And I asked him again, further on in the conversation, Reverend, is there anything I can do? He said, do right by Haiti. I asked him a third time, and Reverend never moved from that. And yet, what is going on here? I mean, you see John F. Kennedy, brains blown out in the, you got to tell me about this article you wrote about Truman. I mean, when Truman said they need to dismantle the CIA right after the Kennedy assassination. Dwight Eisenhower looked, he was disbelieving after, it's like they knew that this was an inside job. What is going on?
Santita, I'm sorry, but my wife needs my full attention right now. Perhaps we can continue this some other time.
We will.
I really have enjoyed it.
I love you so much, and thank you. Oh boy, Dwight McKee, this is, I told you, you always get so much from from him. And Reverend Dr. Yuri, Reverend Dr. Yuri, what's your takeaway today? Is Reverend Yuri
Trust
still?
but verify.
Okay. Trust but verify.
Trust but verify. I mean, the truth of the matter is that when the media is now, media operations when you're dealing with warfare is nothing new.
Mm-hmm.
The collaboration between corporate interests and military outcomes is much more obvious than I think any of us would have expected. And so if that's the case, then it's incumbent upon all of us to be more intentional as you encourage us on your show and in all of these conversations. Don't just go along to get along. Get the information that's going to help you to be informed in your citizenship.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's the key takeaway. It's not shocking that we've seen the manipulation of information and the distortion of facts and the removal of folks who put dissenting voices on there. This isn't like a shock that, oh my gosh, we've gone down this black hole. No, this is to quote Childish Gambino, this is America. And the genetics of the country, when we talk about we the people, folks keep talking about the people. I want to know who the heck was we? Because whoever was in the room to help define the orbit of we controls the narrative, controls the inputs that keep the rest of us kind of fighting over the crumbs on the margins. And so part of what we've heard is that, look, this isn't our imagination. It's not a game of do you believe your lying eyes? Your eyes aren't lying to you, and you're not losing your ability to hear clearly. The question really becomes, do we have the courage to do what's necessary? And we heard the reference to Rabbi Abraham Joshua Heschel. He also said we've lost our ability for outrage. This should create outrage, not just outrage to throw abstract anger out in the ether, but it should mobilize the masses to make their voices not only heard in the streets, but at the polling booth. And I know folks say, well, if it's not going to change anything, voting hasn't changed anything. Let me tell you something. Not to vote is to vote. It means that basically you're okay if nothing ever changes without your participation. That's why we got to get serious about what's important, what's on the agenda as we talk about these national and international issues. They all interact. They all overlap. And we have a duty. Yes, it is our burden as the citizenry to make sure that we don't just let the train continue to run away and just stop wherever it will. Either we have to take over the train or get the hell off of it.
Dwight McKee, your thoughts?
Well, I think that it's imperative that we really unpack everything we've been taught from day one, and that we take a serious look at what patriotism is, what it means, and how it's been manipulated, and how it's manipulated us. And that if we're going to be people of principles and people of values, people of integrity, then that has to be the foundation of our framework as we operate in life. And that challenges anything that does not qualify or deal with it. Whether it is, my country 'tis of thee, whether it is, Black Power, whether it is America, love it or leave it. It's all of our fundamental premises have to be aligned with our spiritual values. And those spiritual values have to start with truth and then justice and then equity for all. And to the extent that being a patriot violates that, we have to challenge that. To the extent that us being, militant competes with that, we have to challenge that. To the extent that anything other than the brotherhood of man competes with that, we have to challenge that, whatever it is, and not be afraid to raise those questions, and not be afraid to raise those questions, and not be afraid to face the truth and to learn the truth, and then to organize our lives around the truth.
There's been such a shift in conscientiousness, not in terms of American policy, at least not yet, although eventually that's going to have to follow the people, Dwight. It seems like it all happened so quickly. Since October 7th, the calculation would have been going into October 7th that all of the sympathy would have been with Israel. And yet something else happened, Dwight. I mean, aside from social media, I mean, what's in the zeitgeist? What happened?
The inconsistencies, the inhumanity, the contradictions, the exposure to contradictions. That people begin to see that things were not as they were told that they were. That, as Brother Ray said, is that he believed all the time when Israel was founded in 1948, they rejoiced because he thought it was a great thing because nobody told them there was 700 people already living there and what had to happen to them. And so you rejoice with no information, with bad information. Once you get more information, then your joy can turn to sorrow because now you begin to see more sides to what you're looking at. And so I think what has changed is in the information age. Now, even the young people have access to more points of view, to more information. One of the things I thought was very interesting was reaction to the young people, to the students who had gotten Osama bin Laden's letter that he had written about America. And they say, hey, this is a different point of view. We hadn't seen this perspective. This ain't about them hating Americans. This is about them trying to manage American values been imposed. And American decadence have been imposed. And everybody should read the letter. And there was an immediate backlash. Said, no, you shouldn't read this letter. You have no right to read this letter because you don't have a right to another point of view. We want you to only understand what we tell you and only believe what we tell you. We have to control the narrative because us controlling the narrative give us the power to do what we want to do. And what we want to do is to exploit the world for our benefit. And I think people are beginning to see through it. So I don't think the zeitgeist has changed. I think people's access to information and exposure has changed.
Well, Reverend Dr. Yuri, do you have any final thoughts before we go?
No, I think it's always good to have perspectives from folks who have been inside the machine of government to come back and tell us not what we've heard in the mythology of this kind of Puritan notion of how the government operates, that the government is the corporation of corporations when we think about business interests, and that as participants in that corporatocracy, if you will, we as the workers who drive the economy of the federal government, literally, have not only the responsibility, but to Big Brother Dwight's point, to your point and others, we have the power. The question is, will we have the courage to use it? That's the outstanding issue in this moment.
Dwight, your final thought before we go.
Again, and that's why Jesus said, and Yuri makes a profound point, that's why Jesus said, know the truth, and the truth must set you free. Is that once if you have a value system and you find out the truth will set you free. And so I always say that if people don't want you to know the truth, it's because they don't want you to be free. It's understanding, always understand what you're looking at and look beyond the veil. Look beyond the veil. See past what they're telling you you're looking at. Because they will only tell you what they want you to know. That's why the Bible also says, show yourself approved unto God. O worker that need not be ashamed. Is God mandate to us to see beyond the veil. And he's going to hold us accountable and responsible for having not done that.
Amen to that. We're all responsible. That's what the rabbi said. You might not be culpable, but you're responsible. So everybody think about that. I love you, everybody. Cannot wait to be with you on Sunday on Keep Hope Alive with Reverend Jesse Jackson. We'll be talking about this and Henry Kissinger's legacy, and there's so much. I can't wait to have these gentlemen and others on the panel. And can't wait to have you join us, everybody. Hope you enjoyed today's show. I always love having Ray McGovern, a man of such courage and intellectual, and more than that, moral clarity. I mean, he just wants what's right, not what's better, what's right. And I support
And he does
that.
a great Kissinger impersonation.
Oh.
It was outstanding.
you know, his other life, he is a cut up. He will make you pass out on the floor. Do you hear me? I promise you before the Lord. He's got some more impressions up his sleeve. I said, really?
Well, I had just one question they left, and I was so sorry I didn't get a chance to ask it. And that question was, what really happened to the third building, Ray?
Goodbye. Hey, goodbye. Get him off of my show. My name ain't Rosie O'Donnell.
We're on YouTube.
No, I ain't Rosie O'Donnell. This is the Santita Jackson Show. Go on your own podcast and ask them questions. How about that? That's right.
I just want to know what happened to the man.
Like I said, you go on and ask that in your pulpit. You see how long you keep that. So you just go on in your space and you do your thing. I'm sounding like my grandma Helen right now. Lord, I'm channeling her. That's right. Well, you just go on and you go on over there and do your thing. Ooh, but on the day that we'll be able to ask questions and have them answered, that'll be a new day. And we do need that, because these questions and more need to be answered. The distrust and mistrust that we see in our society, a large part of it is because, people tell us not to trust our lying eyes. We saw Kennedy was shot from the front. The back of his head blew out. Stop telling me that some guy who can't even shoot straight got him as his car was moving away. That ain't working for anybody anymore. It's not. And when you find out all of the gas and all the oil that they have in Gaza, you got a lot of questions. It's not just about religion. This is about resources, everybody. There's a whole lot going on here. You need to have the courage to ask the questions and demand the answers. You need to do that. So I love you all, and goodbye, Dwight. I'm not going to speak. Let him go. Now, y'all go on and do your little. Go on and do your.
We're going to go.
That's right.
Dwight, I'll call you in a minute and ask you.
That's right.
I guess that land swap that became Gaza didn't work out real well.
Let him go on and do his little. Y'all do your little podcast. That's right. Dicklet and Dicklet Gregory 1 and 2. Go on. But yeah. Let them go on. Let them go. Love you, everybody. Like and share the show. Carol Soskin, happy birthday, my sweet. I like Rosie O'Donnell too, Paula, but I remember when she asked that question, they got her off television almost immediately. They used all kinds of pretexts, but I said, she's about to get kicked off TV. And that's what happened to her. And one of the things I learned from Reverend was that he said, you can know all of these things, but he said, you gotta say just enough and do things so that you can stay in the fight and stay in the room. But you need to start asking questions, everybody. Because I promise you, you're the one who's in control. Because you won't seize control, other people are controlling for you. Stop it. Oh, I don't have time. Yeah, you do. Because certain persons on here got a lot of questions for me, but then when I ask you to call in, I got to go to work. Really? Ask a question. And if we're going to get into it, let's get into it. Don't say I'm going to talk down to you. You know I don't talk down to anybody. But you need to come to me with receipts because I do a lot of research. That's what I do. That's why I'm here. let's work all this stuff through. I do love Rosie O'Donnell. And you know what? And I have to say, she was also very helpful to me as a singer, got me before a lot of Broadway people. Just wonderful. I was on her show after I sang at the Clinton inauguration. Lovely person and a real progressive. And Dwight and Reverend Dr. Urey. She kept the same manager throughout her career, and it was a black man. She didn't drop him when she got hot. I mean, he came up to us right after we got off. We walked off the set, and it was like, wait a minute, because he said, "Oh yeah," he said, "No, I'm her manager. I have been with her since the beginning of her career." That's Rosie is that kind of ride or die. Good people, good people, good people. And of course, they would make her a nut because she has the courage to ask the questions that many of us are afraid to ask. Think about that, everybody. Love you, Dwight. Love you, Reverend Dr. Urey. Thank you, Henry. Love you too. Thank you for a great show, everybody. Ray McGovern, Pastor Tisha Dixon Williams, Bryce Green, Reverend Dr. Gibbs. Can't do it without any of you. Any of you. Love you all, my morning stars. I love you. And everybody, think about it. Dwight, my mother felt that the bag lunch at Rainbow Push is going to be a great idea. So we're going to come up with a date over the next 2 or 3 weeks. And on Saturday, about 12 o'clock, we're going to meet at Push and have Dwight and a couple of others leading us in a discussion about current affairs. That's right. And, mix some history in it. But it's going to be a bag lunch. Bring your own lunch. We'll have some snicky snacks, but bring your own lunch. It's going to be a bag lunch. It's going to be big fun. You might even want to bring some wings that other people want to try. So we'll be talking about that more next week. I love you, everybody. God bless you. Have a great day. And if you're in Chicago, cover your head, particularly the ladies, because it's raining outside. I don't want to go out, but I gotta. Love you. God bless you.